up, everybody? What up, God? I'm all warmed up now. I'm broke into my sweat, I'm ready. Bring a very special guest to the mic. This is one of our griots in our community, one of the elders. Let's hear it for him. Give it up for the elders. Respect. I'm old school. I respect this brother a lot amongst other brothers, but he got some words for you tonight. Let's hear it from the griot.
Thank you. You know, before I get started, I just wanted to say Mike contacted me about a week ago, and he asked me to come and participate in her performance tonight. And initially I was honestly humbled, and I was honored, flattered, and I was frankly a little bit afraid. See, I'm not a spoken word artist, I am a poet. And I've worked with a number of spoken word artists throughout Detroit. And my initial reaction was, let me get somebody else to do this. Mike wasn't hearing it. And then to add to my frustration, he said, oh yeah, brother, I'd just like you to do a little griot thing. For those of you that are unfamiliar, this is an honored tradition in West Africa when we talk about a griot. It's an elevated position. It is the teller of stories and people who relay information and the histories of a culture, and I'm not worthy of them. And then I stopped and I thought about it, and I'm still, thinking about saying, no, I can't do this. And it hit me. The spirit hit me and it said, yes, you are a griot. You see, I grew up in these hallowed halls and these very walls right in this very room. My mama was big on the arts, and so I was constantly being brought here as a child. And so I lived in the DIA as a little child, and I revered this space. And I do have a story to tell. So if y'all would just bear with me, I'm going to tell a little bit of my story as a young man growing up in Detroit. But before we go further, if Mike and y'all will approve, Mike sent me a song and it's called King Tut Strut. But just for tonight, I want to change the name of this song, Mike, if it's all right, from King Tut Strut, and if y'all approve, to the Griot's Groove. Y'all approve? Yeah, all right. So I was born here in Detroit, born in a hospital not very far from here. I grew up over on Elmhurst and 14th Street. Actually, my early years were on Hazelwood and 12th Street, right down the street from Claremont and 12th Street. How many of y'all familiar with that infamous corner? Yeah. But I grew up around Central High School, right across the street from New Mount Zion Baptist Church, that had once upon a time been a storied synagogue. As a child, I grew up on that block. I was colored. We were the third colored family on the block. You see, back in the day, we were labeled colored. My birth certificate said Negro child. So I grew up, I'm a kid. What do I know? Didn't matter to me, colored. People would say, nice little colored boy, okay, whatever. I'm a kid. It mattered not to me. But I grew up in a vibrant community, a diverse community. The fact that my next door neighbor was German and the people across the street were Jewish really meant nothing to me as a little boy growing up. Everybody looked out for me in the community. And I was a rambunctious child, got my fair share of mischief. But my family was close. It was just me, myself, my older brother Carl, and my parents. I am convinced to this day that my parents were soulmates. I grew up in a loving family, on a loving block. We didn't have much, but I didn't know that. Poverty was a foreign concept to me. My parents did not raise me to be poor, so I knew nothing about being poor. I knew there was things I wasn't getting, but it didn't really matter much. But one thing that my mother instilled in me, if you really wanted something, you either worked for it or you created it. So not a bleach bottle or oatmeal box, nothing in our house went unused. I had one toy soldier, an oatmeal box that became a train, a bleach bottle that became a ship. I had a ball. I'd take a box and turn it into a fort, a castle, go outside and play in the dirt. We had a wonderful time. Every Saturday, we would go up, my daddy would take me up to 12th Street, and I'd get my hair cut. When we walk into the barber shop, the first man there at the first chair was Brother Jesse. We'd walk in, I'm a little fella. And my dad would walk in with me, and Brother Jesse would say, "Hey there, Brother Taylor." My father would nod and smile, "Brother Jesse." Brother Jesse would look at me and say, "Hey, Al." "Hey." I'd go on and sit down. Now, this was a time when children were seen and not heard. So I'd find magazines to rifle through and things to listen to and things to look at, and I'd listen to the old men talk. But it was a different time, and so largely their conversations were about sports, baseball in particular. They loved their Detroit Tigers. There was an old guy that shined shoes. Now, there were two other guys that came into the shop. Brother Jesse had the first chair. Mr. Johnny came in and he had the second chair. And then occasionally young Johnny would come in. Young Johnny was Mr. Johnny's son. Young Johnny was different. Brother Jesse was very stoic. Now, I might mention that Brother Jesse was a black Muslim. Now, to say a black anything in 1960 was a big deal, but Brother Jesse was a black Muslim, a member of the Nation of Islam. Mr. Johnny was a light-skinned man, and back in the day, they talked about people in terms of the shade of their skin. Brother Jesse was brown-skinned, Mr. Johnny was light-skinned with good hair. And then there was young Johnny who would come in, and his hair was different because he had a conch. Yeah, some of y'all don't know what a conch is, do you? Well, a conch was he had his hair processed. Some of y'all that do remember back in the day, remember James Brown had a conch. A lot of the black entertainers or colored entertainers had a conch, and young Johnny had a conch. And so when he came in late, Brother Jesse would look at him with a certain disdain. Mr. Johnny would be a little annoyed because he was late, but young Johnny was cool, so I liked him. So young Johnny would look at me and he'd say, "Hey, what's up, young fella?" I'd smile, "Hey." And then the other fellas would come in for young Johnny, the cats that had conchs. Now, they couldn't do conchs in there, but young Johnny would clip them up. But the other fellas that came in, these were the players. Dare I say, they were pimps. They came in and they'd have their shark skin pants and their cool gabardine shirts and their alligator shoes, and they had that strut, and I liked them cats a lot. I didn't know what a pimp was, I just knew they were cool. So, but when I look back, this is what I was raised with. I looked at all these different elements in our community. This was my story. I had Brother Jesse the Muslim, Mr. Johnny, who I now know was a numbers man, all the working men that came to get their hair cut. This is my fabric of my story. Now, what I also didn't realize at the time was right up on Linwood, right up by my school, was a famed corridor. Because in that corridor was a host of houses of worship that would determine black culture, not only in Detroit, but throughout America. You have first, right just below Tuxedo, Muhammad's Mosque, or it was at that time Muhammad's Temple #1 of the Nation of Islam. All the Muslims in the community attended that house of worship. A little further down, you have Reverend C.L. Franklin's Bethel, somebody help me out. New Bethel Baptist Church. This is Reverend C.L. Franklin's church. For those of you that don't know, that's Aretha Franklin's daddy, a dear friend of Martin Luther King, another important house of worship in Detroit. And then a little further down, then there was the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Pastor Albert Clegg at this particular church. Tremendous corridor, because this was forming black ideology, black theology. This was the foundation for many of us. And then just south of there is an iconic place that some of you may or may not be familiar with, but Black Jesus is on the corner of Linwood and Chicago. Black Jesus painted that way in the summer of 1967. And some of you may remember that time. But again, I'm a child, and I kind of had a charmed life as far as I was concerned. But then In January of 1963, my daddy died, and my life changed dramatically. The summer of 1963, we went away, and Martin Luther King delivered his famed speech. And then in the fall of 1963, they killed President Kennedy, and things began to change. Going on in 1967, the riots in Detroit, and my life changed forever. Then in 1968, they killed Malcolm X. I'm sorry, it was 1965. 1968, they killed Martin Luther King, and Detroit drastically changed. 1969, I moved away. That was kind of the end of my early days in Detroit, and I could go on and on and on, but I don't want to keep y'all here all night, and they got more music to play. So indeed, I am a griot. I appreciate you all listening to me tonight, but yes, I am a griot, and I dare say, so are you. Thank you.